What is good and what is up, y'all? It's your boy here, Jay, back and better than ever with the very first episode of Jay's Point After on video. It's been a long time coming, a lot of trials and tribulations to get to this very moment. I know we've had Padres banter, I know we've had Chargers banter, but this is the very first episode of Jay's Point After in the wide world coverage of sports on video. We've got a lot to talk about, a lot to dive into, so I don't want to waste too much time. Without further ado, welcome to the very first episode of Jay's Point After on video. Let's get it. What is up, y'all, and welcome to the very first episode of Jay's Point After on video. We made it, y'all. Finally made it to the video side of things on Jay's Point After. You see all of my gear in the back behind me, and it's been a long time since we last talked, so we got a lot to talk about, and I don't want to waste any more time. So without further ado, welcome to the very first episode of Jay's Point After on video, the wide world coverage of sports on Jay's Point After. The NFL is officially back with the first week in the books. Some amazing and also horrible football being played week one, as week one is the week of the unexpected. Tons of close games, whether it was the Niners and Seahawks, Cardinals at Saints, Vikings at Bears, or Steelers at Jets, and the return of A.A. Ron in New York. Lots of storylines and headlines, so let's get through them in the full slate of games and scores of week one before we start this Sunday off today for week two, and a quick breakdown of what stood out to me, mostly. But right before that, let's get into the Thursday night game that was 2 nights ago between the Commanders and the Packers, as the newly equipped Packers take out, 3 nights ago, as the newly equipped Packers take out the Commanders in Lambeau Field 27-18. But truthfully, it was much more of a blowout than the game and score said. The Packers defense ate the Commanders alive, and putting a lot of pressure on Jaden Daniels, as he was hit 12 times, most in his career, and also only allowing 51 rushing yards, letting Jordan Love feast. Not too flashy of a night, but definitely better than most, as the stat line provided. 19 of 31, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, 113 passer rating, 113.9 to be specific. As, like I said, not too flashy, but getting the job done is Jay Love. The Packers dominated the entire game, having Jacobs also getting 23 carries and 84 rushing yards with a touchdown. Although there was some bad news with the wide receiver core, as Jaden Reed went down and hopefully will come back stronger. So, that's not too good for the wide receiver core, but they just added Matthew Golden in the draft. So, perfect position for Matthew to go ahead and get some more touches. Daniels, like I said, was under duress most of the game, but did what he could towards the end, finishing with a 24 of 42, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 17 rushing yards. So couldn't get anything going with his legs. In the end, the Packers again dominated and proving they are a real threat, beating back-to-back 12-win teams to start the year. They could be up there with the top 2 teams in the NFC, right there with the Eagles. Packers can't say enough about, since the addition to Micah Parsons and obviously all of the pieces that they already have, it's just a scary sight. So they keep winning these games, keep proving to people that they are as scary as they seem. And, it's only up from here for the Packers and Jay Love. And as for the Commanders, obviously it's a tough environment to go into Lambeau Field. One of the toughest, if not the toughest environment, I think, in the entire NFL when it comes to the fans and the noise and everything. But ultimately, I still think that they're going to be at the top of the NFC and make the playoffs. So they're going to make a run, and we'll see what they do this year. NFC Championship, it'll be tough again. Will Jaden Daniels have his sophomore spell? I don't know, but I don't think that, I'm not going to hope for it, and I know that the Commanders are going to be good this year. But let's go ahead and move on to the first week slate, as the first week was absolutely insane. Just like I said, crazy football, bad football, good football, just entertainment across the board, the week one slate. And there's going to be even more entertainment later on today, as it's a beautiful Sunday morning for some more football, of course, in the week two. But let's go ahead and start with the season opener, not this past Thursday, but the Thursday before, as the Cowboys visited the Eagles in Philadelphia, as the Eagles edged the Cowboys 24-20 in a lightning and spit-filled opener. Jalen Carter was ejected before the very first snap of the game as he went ahead and spit on Dak Prescott. There was video of Dak spitting in Jalen Carter's direction, but Jalen Carter then went and took offense to that, walked up to him, noticed that he spat in his direction, or, maybe anything of that. I don't know, what had happened. The video can only tell you so much. But they obviously exchanged a few words, and then Jalen Carter went ahead and spit on Dak Prescott's chest, literally before the first snap. Not only is that terrible because he got ejected, but it's a character thing. I think that, you gotta check that before the first snap. Your emotions are that high. Obviously they're that high because that's the first snap of the season and you want to get the season going. But dude, you haven't even played yet. You know what I'm saying? So it was just not good for Jalen Carter, and obviously not good for the Eagles because the Cowboys played some very inspired football. But let's get right into it, as a lot closer game than a lot of people expected, as the Cowboys played inspired football, like I said, with the offense looking good. Even though Dak had 188 yards passing, his legs looked fresh, and ripping it to CD, who had 110 yards of the 188 yards passing. But Lamb did drop three key late passes, and the last one was tough, but ultimately those three passes late in the game hurt them. One of them could ultimately put them in a position to, put them at least within 1 point or take the lead. But unfortunately not. Those three drop balls are really gonna hurt until they play this afternoon. But that being said, Jalen Hurts led the game in rushing while Saquon looked good, but only one target to AJ, which was a reception for 8 yards. Things need to improve for the passing game for Philadelphia, while Dallas just didn't score in the second half, and the Eagles tacked on 3 to take the W. Like I said, Dallas getting in their own way. It's tough when you have penalties the way that you do. It's tough when you go ahead and drop those 3 passes late in the game. It's already tough enough facing the defending Super Bowl champions and going into their house on opening night, but they were in the game. They were in the game with the defending Super Bowl champions in Philadelphia. But on the Eagles side of perspective, they'll be fine. I understand that that's only a 4-point win against the Dallas Cowboys, but who knows? Maybe Dallas is a little bit better this season, and I just think that the Philly is just, getting into the motion, right? They're just getting into the fold with the season, and they'll be fine. They'll be there right at the end of the year with, the top of the NFC. But we already went ahead and discussed the next game that was the following day, the Chargers and the Chiefs. It was a fantastic game, obviously. Come on now. It was a fantastic game, but like I said, we already went ahead and discussed it on Chargers Banter. Go ahead and like and subscribe, not only to this, but as well as the Chargers Banter. Go ahead and watch that episode. I went ahead and talked about the full game there on my Chargers Banter episode, so go ahead and tune in for me. But let's get on into the first game of Sunday. Bucks at Falcons. Bucks would take out the Falcons in a hell of a week 1 game, as Emeka Egbuka, the rookie, had 2 TDs, 4 catches, 67 yards performance, including a touchdown with 59 seconds left to go ahead and win the game. Michael Penix looks solid, having shown his very live arm in this game, going 27 of 42, 298 and a touchdown. The Falcons lost by 3 and also had a missed kick by Koo, which could have made it tied, but in the end, it was the Bucks who prevailed. So Michael Penix looks really good with his arm, and the Bucks, honestly, are going to be right there at the top of the South, if not win the South this season. Obviously, in division foe right there, so that helps them out right there. But the Bucks, I think, are going to be just as good as they were last year, if not better. Hopefully, Emeka Egbuka has a great rookie season on top of Mike Evans on the other side of him, and they're going to be dangerous. We'll see what happens with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers throughout the season and the Falcons, because interestingly enough, I think that Michael Penix is going to have a really good sophomore campaign, and I know he didn't have a lot of experience last year from his first year, but I think this year he's going to have an even better year. So let's go ahead and see what happens with the Falcons this season. Moving on to the Bengals, they visited the Browns in a thriller. The Bengals would escape Cleveland with a 17-16 win over the Browns. Joe Burrow struggled, going 14 of 23, 113 yards with a touchdown, with an 87.8 passer rating and 51.4 QBR. The Bengals defense was pivotal, collecting 3 sacks and picking off Joe Flacco twice to keep the comeback from happening, as Flacco went 31 of 45, 290 yards, a TD, and 2 interceptions. The Browns would destroy the Bengals in total yards, but just could not capitalize when needed, ultimately leading Cincinnati to taking the W. So I'm not sure what the Browns are going to be doing going forward with their future. I feel like they're really playing and toying with their future, especially at the quarterback position, because you can't, I mean, Joe Flacco is Joe Flacco, right? All respect to Joe Flacco, Super Bowl winning quarterback, but he's he's literally he came back out of retirement. So my point is you already know what you're going to get from Joe Flacco. So let's move on to the future and see what we can get from these new guys. Don't waste your time with Dylan Gabriel. Don't waste your time with Shadur Sanders. If you're going to even keep Shadur Sanders, right? I heard Bailey Zappi was getting reps over him. So tons of stuff to consider. Don't know what the Browns are doing. But on the Bengals side of things, very concerning. They always do slow starts, but I guess it's a win, not only in the game, obviously, but it's a win that they got a W this early on in the season in this fashion, because typically they wouldn't be able to get W's at all with under Zach Taylor. So getting a W in this fashion, even though it's in Cleveland, in division foe. So I think it's a W across the board for the Bengals, regardless of the stat sheet. Yes, it was a struggle for Joe Burrow. He's still one of my favorites to go ahead and win the MVP outside of Jordan Love and Justin Herbert. But going forward, what will the Browns do with the quarterback position? Moving on to the Dolphins at Colts. The Colts would absolutely manhandle the Dolphins in week 1, 33-8, as the Colts new signal caller Daniel Jones had himself a day. 22 of 29, 272 yards, touchdown, and 2 rushing touchdowns to add to that. Taylor also had himself a day. 18 carries, 71 yards rushing, while Pittman had 6 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown, and rookie tight end Tyler Warren had 7 receptions for 76 yards. What a debut. While Tua had a rough day, to say the least, going 14 of 23, 114 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions with a QBR of 2.7. Achane scored the only touchdown, but it came late in the fourth quarter to avoid the shutout. The Dolphins would only collect 12 first downs and run only 46 plays to the Colts 70. 46 plays to the Colts 70. Colts would also almost double the Dolphins' total yards. So just across the board, a crapshoot week 1 for the Miami Dolphins. It's tough to be a Dolphins fan right now. Not only because they just lost this game in this fashion, but there's a lot of questions across the board. What's going to happen with Tyreek Hill? Are they going to trade him, right? Tua Tagovailoa. Very concerning week 1. We understand the history of, the concerning, throwing the ball not, as well as he should in years past. We understand the injury history, but what's going to happen with Tua? Is he going to turn a corner? Is he going to be better? Is he going to be, what he was in 2021, 2022? And Mike McDaniel on the hot seat, I think. Personally, understandably so, he's bringing a flair and a fire to the Miami Dolphins that has never been brought in recent history. And really brought the Miami Dolphins in resurgence in the sense that, playoff and, people pay attention to them. But as of late, it hasn't been good. And I don't know what it is like going forward for Mike McDaniel, if he's going to be on the hot seat or not. But truthfully, from my perspective, he should be on the hot seat. And, like I said, tons of questions across the board for the Dolphins. So just a complete crapshoot. We'll see what happens going forward. But we'll see if Tyreek will be traded. We'll see if Tua, can continue to progress. And will Mike McDaniel be out of there? But on the Colts side, because it was more about the Dolphins, on the Colts side of things, Daniel Jones, absolutely fantastic day. But because of all that has to be said about the Dolphins, I don't know what you could say about the Colts, right? Fantastic day, fantastic W, of course. Anytime you get a 33-8 W in the NFL, that's awesome. But I don't know if that's a measuring stick for you to be like, all right, this is who we are, right? So, going into week 2, we'll see what they can go ahead and stir up. But at the end of the day, the Dolphins, absolute crapshoot in week 1. Raiders at Pats, as the Raiders would take out the newly led Pats by Mike Vrabel and win 20-13 in a closer game than it seemed. The Raiders offense looked potent with newly assigned quarterback Geno Smith and rookie Ashton Genty, with also newly acquired head coach Pete Carroll looking for some sweet revenge on the Pats from back in the day. Always salty about that. Geno Smith threw for 224 of 34, 362 yards, a touchdown in his debut as a Raider, a franchise record for someone who has made their Raider debut. As Genty also broke the goal line for his first touchdown in the NFL, putting also putting up 389 total yards and big plays. The Raiders just didn't follow up with key points and first downs. I did notice that they were always deep in their third downs, 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 12s, although the Pats also put up yards, having 336, and Drake May also showing his talents, going 30 of 46, 287, touchdown and an interception, and Booty going 103 yards on 6 receptions. Both defenses had 4 sacks and ultimately came down to a stop by the Raiders and a field goal, which led to an onside kick by New England, which they did not get, as the Raiders would go on to get the W. But the Raiders' offense looks pretty potent. Obviously, not a very, very, very good defense, and a new regime with Mike Vrabel at the helm with the Patriots. But at the end of the day, it's still a great W for the Raiders to go out there to New England, which I always think is a tough environment, no matter who you guys are. I just think that going to Foxborough, playing in that environment, they have a good fan base, and they always bring it. So at the end of the day, great W for the Raiders. Going ahead and obviously playing my Chargers on Monday night, tomorrow night. So it's going to be an interesting one, to say the least. But they get the W there. And then New England, I think that they're going to be perfectly fine with Drake May. He'll continue to learn, and they'll continue to progress. Moving on to the Cardinals at Saints, as Spencer Rattler would be named the starting quarterback and first opener for Rattler, which he looked very solid. But overall, the veteran play by Kyler Murray led to a Cardinals W, 20-13. Rattler would go 27 of 46, 214, also ran for 29 yards. But Kyler, not the best day passing, but efficient, going 21 of 29, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns, 38 yards rushing, while Connor had 8 carries for 69 yards. Marvin Harrison Jr. also had 5 receptions for 71 yards receiving, and McBride 6 receptions for 61 yards, while Juwan Johnson on the Saints was leading receiver, having 8 receptions for 76 yards. Kamara had the lone touchdown for the Saints, but the Cardinals defense would prevail as they would get the goal line stand on the Saints, driving with the last chance shot to the end zone, which was high above Olave's head. But honestly, the Cardinals are going to be a sleeper, and they will continue to get better in that NFC West. Very tough division. And for the Saints, Spencer Rattler, awesome game. Will he continue to be the starting quarterback for the Saints going forward? I'm not sure. Moving on to the Steelers at Jets, as Aaron Rodgers returns to New York, and the return was everything and more. As Aaron Rodgers' return was everything and more, like I said, as Rodgers took out the Jets 34-32 in a close one, but would go crazy on his return, looking like old Aaron Rodgers, dicing up the defense, going 22 of 30, 244 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 136.7 QB rating. DK led the Steelers in receiving but did not have a touchdown, but Austin, Warren, Smith, and Skoranek all had a touchdown. But the Jets and newly acquired quarterback from none other than the Steelers, Justin Fields, looked really good in green, going 16 of 22, 218, a touchdown, also 48 rushing yards, while Breece Hall had 108 yards rushing and 19 carries but no touchdown. Garrett Wilson led the receiving with 7 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown, and Jets would go on to have 394 total yards, but the penalties, fumble, and sacks late cost the Jets in their comeback, even though they had a chance. Steelers would go on to get the W, as Ramsey would seal the deal with a big hit on Garrett Wilson. Man, do the Steelers look good? And maybe I'm a little bit wrong about how Aaron Rodgers was going to perform in the Steelers uniform, considering what he did with New York. But man, this first game, and maybe it was a little bit of saltiness from what him saying verbatim. I wanted to go ahead and beat a lot of people in the Jets organization, and he did just that. And like I said, they look really good, and it's going to be very interesting going into the AFC North. If they end up being, they're always going to be 500 with Mike Tomlin, but if they end up being a little bit better than 500, it's going to be scary in the AFC North. Moving on to the Jets, though, man, what a showing from the Jets. 394 total yards of offense. I think it's something that a lot of people didn't see coming, especially with Justin Fields at the helm. So going to be interesting going forward and seeing Justin Fields continue to be in jet green. Will they be good? I think they'll be in contention for the AFC East, not winning the division by any means, but maybe even second or third place behind the Patriots. Moving on to the Giants, because I don't think the Dolphins are really going to do much right now. Moving on to the Giants, as the Giants at Commanders. Russell Wilson's first game as the Giant was not great, as the Commanders would take the win 21-6. Never really was competitive, as the Giants offense looked pedestrian. Wilson going 17 of 37, 168 yards with a 59.3 QB rating. Neighbors did have 71 yards receiving, but was a frustrating 71 yards as the offense would continue to sputter. While Daniels had 19 of 30, 233 yards, a touchdown, and 68 yards rushing. Krosky Merritt also shined with a great game, 10 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Rookie 7th rounder out of U of A, so go Wildcats. Debo would also make his Commanders debut and find the end zone in his signature sweep play. Commanders would take the convincing W. Obviously, the Commanders played this last Thursday, so you obviously know how I feel like about the Commanders, but the Giants, they need to figure out the quarterback situation. They need to. I know that they have 3 quarterbacks that are, ready to go right now, and I don't think that you throw Jackson Dart into the fold and really, put him in a situation, to lose, right? You want to go ahead and set him up for success, right? And put him in a situation so he can succeed. But ultimately, Russell Wilson's going today, so we'll see Russ again. As QB1, but going forward, they really have to consider what they're going to do, right? Maybe even throw Jameis in there for a game or two, and then eventually try and, roll the dice with Jackson Dart. But I know Jackson's itching to get in there. Ultimately, the Giants just have to find a way to get these quarterbacks to mesh. And once they start winning games, or hopefully when they start winning games, that all the problems go away. But it's always going to be problems and always going to be questions asked when you're losing games and you don't have the quarterback answered. So that is going to be the question moving forward. Moving on to the Panthers at Jags, as the Jags would take out the Panthers in their home opener 26-10 in another convincing win. Lawrence would go 19 of 31, 178 yards with a touchdown, while Etienne had a resurgence game, going 143 yards rushing and 16 carries with a long of 71 yards. Travis Hunter would make his Jags debut on both sides of the ball, but most notably on offense, having 6 receptions for 33 yards, while Brian Thomas only had 1 reception for 11 yards. On the other side, Bryce Young struggled, going 18 of 35, 154 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and 40 yards rushing. Hubbard had 16 carries, 57 yards, and a receiving touchdown, but the Jags would have 378 yards of total offense and go on to get the W. I think the Jags going to have to continue to see and experience and test the waters of what they're going to do with Travis Hunter. I personally feel like they throw him in some certain packages on offense and then just leave him as one of the number 1 corners on defense, and then just go on from there. I think that he is more valuable on defense, truthfully, but right here it says 6 receptions in the game in his first ever, game in the NFL. So right now it seems like he's having a more of an impact on offense. So who knows, right? Maybe it was just this game because Brian Thomas only had 1 reception, but they'll be just fine. They get the dub here, and they'll figure out what to do with Travis Hunter going forward. But the Panthers, I think they'll also be just fine. In my aspect of fine, they're not going to make the playoffs or, be, anything, to be scared about. But I think that the progression that they're going to make, they're still a young team with Xavier Legette, Bryce Young, and obviously Chuba Hubbard. So just keep the building blocks, keep making baby steps, and eventually I think in 1 or 2 years that the Panthers are going to be right where they want to be. Moving on to the Titans at Broncos, as the Broncos would escape with a win in their home opener versus a not so good Titans team, 20-12. Score was a lot better than it seemed, as Bo Nix was a flustered while going 25 of 40, 176 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 60. Rookie R.J. Harvey would rush for 70 yards in his debut, and Sutton would lead the receiving with 61 yards and a touchdown, but the offense struggled, going 6 of 15 on third downs and had 2 fumbles on top of the 2 picks. Number 1 overall pick Cam Ward made his Titans debut and looked really good in game 1, but had some rookie flashes, holding onto the ball too long and too late, and reads, reads were too late as well, but he will get better. I'm convinced he will get better. But Calvin Ridley did have some key drops in the last drive that maybe put the Titans in position to that maybe capitalize, but they couldn't capitalize. And ultimately, the Denver defense got Ward 6 times. My goodness, and would cap off with another sack. The Broncos would go get the W, even though it wasn't very convincing. I think Cam Ward is going to continue to progress. Yes, he did show some rookie flashes, but he really did show some just raw talent. That translates to the NFL level. A lot of people were worried about whether he was mobile or this or that. Man, could he move? He could run. So he can run. That's a good thing for him. And then for the Denver Broncos, really, really bad showing right week one against the Titans team that a lot of people expect to be at the bottom of the barrel. And a lot of people expected Broncos to make the playoffs. Some people even think the Broncos win the division. So just, very lackluster from the Broncos and Bo Nix, but ultimately I think they'll be just fine. Their defense is way too good to be a terrible team. And Bo Nix last year had a late start and got started, getting into the groove midseason. So who knows? They might pick it up late in the season just like they did last year. Moving on to the Niners at Seahawks. The Niners find a way to go into the 12th man and win a very tough in-division game, 17-13, on a late Jake Tonges TD with Brock rolling right and fading. The Niners all game made pushes but couldn't punch it in while handing the keys to Jake Moody to hit a field goal, and would go and miss 2 key field goals while having 1 blocked, eventually leading him to being cut earlier this week, which was what you don't want to see. But he signed with the Bears, so he's now with the Bears. So we'll see Jake Moody in a Bears uniform. I believe that's who he signed with, if I'm not mistaken. But long story short, Purdy went and had 26 of 35, 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also had 2 interceptions. McCaffrey had a solid game, 69 rushing yards, 73 receiving yards, but Ricky Pearsall led the San Francisco wide receivers with 4 receptions for 108 receiving yards. But the TD came from 2 tight ends, Kittle and Tonjes, in the weaning seconds of the game. Hawks also didn't look bad, as Darnold didn't have a bad game, but also didn't have a great game, going 16 of 23, 150 yards. But Smith and Jigba had 9 receptions of 124 yards, of those 150 yards for receiving. But the Niners would escape with the W. It was a lot closer game than people expected. Truthfully, it looked like the Seattle Seahawks were going to win there until the Jake Tonjes TD super late. But ultimately, I think the Niners will be fine. They got the injury bug right now, so hoping that that doesn't continue for anybody. I don't like to see that happen to any team. Kittle went down this week as well on the IR, and who am I? And Brock. Sorry, man, I couldn't think of who else. It was their quarterback, Brock. So Mac Jones is going to be starting today, and we'll see what happens for the Niners. So will they get the W this weekend in the Seahawks? I think they'll be just fine. Still learning the moves and grooves of Sam Darnold and what he can do at the quarterback position. So they're still learning there, and I think they'll be just fine. The Seahawks and Niners. Moving on to the Lions at Packers. In the debut of Micah Parsons in limited snap count, the Cheeseheads held it down, whooping on the reigning division champs 27-13, as Jay Love was an efficient 16-22, 188 yards, 2 TDs, 128.6 passer QB rating and Jacobs rushing for 66 yards and a touchdown, and Dobbs leading the wide receiver room with 2 receptions and 68 yards receiving. Lions tried to respond with Goff going 31-39, 225, but had 1 touchdown and an interception. Gibbs and Montgomery only combined for 44 yards rushing, but Laporta had 79 yards receiving, and Brown. And I forgot what Amon-Ra had that game. Sorry, I didn't write it down right here, but Amon-Ra didn't really have an astounding game for being, a highly pick in fantasy. But with that, unknown Isaac Tesla came down with the touchdown late in the game to go ahead and put them on the board to not be a complete blowout. But Micah would also get his moment with a chase down sack from behind on Jared Goff in the 4th quarter, and then pointing to the sky, getting his signature go-ahead first sack as a Green Bay Packer. And Green Bay would go on and get the W and make a statement against the Lions. Not only that, past Sunday, which was last week, but also this past Thursday as well. And as for the Lions, very, very concerning. Very pedestrian first week. They don't have Ben Johnson and they don't have their defensive coordinator either. So it's going to be interesting to see, what kind of team they're going to have going forward. Are they going to be the same team? I don't think they're going to be the same exact team. They're still going to have a great record. They're not going to have the first overall seed in the NFC. But what will happen with the Lions going forward, knowing that you don't have the coaches that you used to. Moving on to the Texans at Rams, as the Rams would get away with a win at home 14-9 as the defense stands strong, and Stafford also gets his 6,000 passing yard career milestone, going 21 of 29, 245, a touchdown, and 109.1 QB rating, with Nakua having a feast, going 130 yards on 10 receptions, and Adams having 51 yards in his debut, while Kyron Williams rushed for 66 yards, and the touchdown came from Davis Allen. The touchdown came from Davis Allen. Sorry, not Kyron Williams' touchdown, but touchdown came from Davis Allen, tight end out of Clemson. The Texans looked pedestrian at best at the offense. Did not look good as Stroud went 19 of 27, 188 yards and an interception, 74.3 QB rating, while Chubb had 66 yards rushing, and Higgins led all Houston wide receivers with 32 yards receiving. The Rams would be victorious in their opener. So very concerning right now for the Texans, but especially considering that their team was picked to be a dark horse in the AFC and make a run, but I think they're going to be fine. They'll get a bunch of their pieces back with Mixon and Tank Dell, and they'll finally get, the groove going, and hopefully CJ Stroud's second year wasn't, um, what it was, right? And he replicates that, and it was a fluke. We're just hoping it was a fluke ultimately, but I know their defense is going to be good, so that's one thing that we can bank on with the Texans. And on the opposite side of the ball, the Rams, I mean, as long as Matthew Stafford stays healthy, I think they're going to be in prime position to win the NFC West and also make a real run in the playoffs going forward. Now moving on to the Sunday night game, as it was an absolute barn burner. Ravens at Bills. Bills would come back in an absolute shocker, taking down the Ravens in Buffalo 41-40, which could be an AFC Championship preview. The Bills trailed and would be trailing most of the game and most of the fourth quarter, as reigning MVP Josh Allen would rally the Bills back from 16 points with 4 minutes left, finishing with 33 of 46, 394, 2 touchdowns, 112 quarterback rating, while rushing for 30 yards and another 2 touchdowns. Keon Coleman led all Bills wide receivers with 8 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown, and Kincaid and Cook also joined the touchdown parade, but not all Bills, as the game was dominated by former MVP and former NFL leading rusher Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Jackson going 14 of 19, 209, 2 touchdowns, 144.4 quarterback rating, rushing for 70 yards and another touchdown, while Henry had 18 carries, 169 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Zay Flowers led all Baltimore wide receivers with 7 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. But all was forgotten after a deflection TD for Buffalo and a Henry fumble, leading to another score for Buffalo to take the W. Just absolutely fantastic football all around. Obviously, hurts for the Ravens and the Ravens fans. They're going to possibly be at the AFC Championship facing one another. That's how good these teams are. And, you get exactly what you wanted out of this game. No fight, no give up. There was a ton of scoring. And, obviously you expect more defense, but there was, defense towards the end, the fumble, obviously, on Derrick Henry, who had a fantastic night. But long story short, it is exactly what you expect between these two teams, right? Yeah, it was a blowout at one point, but do you expect the Bills to just give up and roll over? No. But at the end of the day, will the Bills do it this year? That's the big question with them. Got former MVP Josh Allen. He's got all the accolades now. He's got the ring with Haley Steinfeld, right? It's time to get a Super Bowl ring. And will he and the Bills do it this year? And will he lead the franchise after such misery in their history? And the Ravens aspect, right? Their franchise has done it before, but not under Lamar Jackson in the helm of him. I know Harbaugh wants to get him a ring, and it's time for them too. So it's both time for both teams to kind of go win a championship. It's been the Chiefs' time for a long time. I don't think that this year would be it, but again, I'm not gonna, rule the Chiefs out by any means or any stretch of the imagination. But you could possibly see these two teams in the AFC Championship at the end of the year. Moving on to another barn burner of a Monday night football game, Vikings at Bears. Week 1 capper did not disappoint as Vikings came back with 3 touchdowns late as J.J. McCarthy would steal the win in Chicago on Monday Night Football. McCarthy, in his Vikings debut after a year out of surgery, goes 13 of 20, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, 25 rushing yards, a touchdown late to win the game. Jettas had 44 yards and a touchdown, with Jones also having a receiving touchdown, but a new addition, Jordan Mason, had 68 yards rushing as the Vikings defense held the Bears just enough to be able to come back after the first half, which JJ had a tough first half. Caleb looked great in his first drive and quarter, starting 6 for 6 and a rushing touchdown on his first drive. Mind you, first of his career, none in his rookie season. But after that, the offense sputtered as he finished 21 of 35, 210 and a touchdown and rushing touchdown and 58 yards rushing as well. But DeAndre Swift had only 53 yards rushing and on 16 carries. Odunze would get a touchdown as well, while Moore led the wide receivers in yards for 68 on 3 receptions. But although having more yards, they went 3 for 12 on third downs. Although having more yards than the Vikings, 3 for 12 on third downs, while also allowing 3 sacks and 12 penalties that racked up to 127 yards. So Bears shooting themselves in the foot, on top of Caleb not really playing that well after the first drive. The defense did all they could. Defense played lights out. Can't really say much about that side of the ball, but as far as offense, they have to get better. And will Caleb make his progression? I'm not sure. We'll see. You guys know how I feel about that. But yeah, the Bears shot themselves in the foot, and the defense played well, but couldn't hold on long enough, and JJ gets his first win in the NFL. But like I said, they got to figure out what's going to happen with Caleb. Not looking too great in the pocket right now. And then also, Vikings, dark horse, who knows? JJ McCarthy, will he flip the script and, turn the page on the Sam Darnold era, and it's the J.J. McCarthy era. But let's go ahead and get into today's slate, because that is what matters. That was the end of week 1 slate, and let's get into this week 2. Kicking us off at 10 a.m. is the Browns visiting the Ravens, and then we got the Jaguars visiting the Bengals, Giants at Cowboys, Bears at Lions, Patriots at Dolphins, Niners at Saints, Bills at Jets, Seahawks at Steelers, Rams at Titans, to round out the 10 o'clock times. And then we go to 1 o'clock. We got Panthers at Cardinals, Broncos at Colts, Eagles at Chiefs, Super Bowl rematch, Falcons at Vikings to round out the night. And then Monday night, we got 2 Monday night games. And yes, sir, my Chargers are playing. I'm excited about it, y'all, because not only is it Monday night, but it is Raider week, and I have Monday off. So Buccaneers, Texans are, we got a doubleheader, mind you, as well. Buccaneers, Texans are going to start off the night for Monday night, and then Chargers at Raiders in Las Vegas after that fabulous Canelo and Crawford fight. They're going ahead and getting that stadium ready for this Monday night game. But, that's just a little side note. Canelo looked a shell of himself, a little bit older, but Crawford really taking the reins, and congratulations to Bud Crawford getting that dub over Canelo last night. But that is the week 2 slate. I'm so excited because, guys, football is back. First time talking about it with you guys on video. It just feels right? It just feels right. I need it for my soul. But in the end, that is all for the NFL talk. And right after the break, we'll get into some college football talk and some MLB talk to round out this episode of JPA. Alrighty, guys, let's get into some college football landscape, because yesterday was absolutely insane when it came in terms of college football. A couple upsets happened, and we'll get right into them. But first, let's get into the rankings of the top 25. And this is obviously not official after week 3. The week 3 rankings will come out, I believe, today or Monday. So just hear me out. This is this morning on what I have in front of me right now. But number one overall team in the nation, why leading team in the nation? I don't know. I cannot find my words right now. But the number one team in the nation is the Ohio State Buckeyes. At number two, we got Penn State. At number three, we got LSU. At number four, we got Oregon. At number five, we got Miami. At number six, we got Georgia. At number seven, we got Texas. At number eight, we have Notre Dame. At number nine, we have Illinois. At number 10, we have Florida State. At number 11, we have South Carolina. At number 12, we have Clemson. At number 13, we have Oklahoma. At number 14, we have Iowa State. 15, Tennessee. 16, Texas A&M. 17, Ole Miss. 18, South Florida. 19, Alabama. 20, Utah. 21, Texas Tech. 22, Indiana. 23, Michigan. 24, Auburn. And 25, Missouri to round out the top 25. Now, let's get into the scores of yesterday because, man almighty, did we have a day, like I said, in week 3. My goodness. But let's get into the scores I feel like that matter the most. Let's start off with Florida visiting LSU. Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. Obviously, there was some heat going on before the game, but Florida goes in there. They have a gauntlet of a schedule. And unfortunately, they lose 20-10 to LSU as LSU goes ahead and gets that big time W. Didn't look too great for LSU being the number 3 team in the nation going up against Florida, but Florida is a very good team. They just have a very tough schedule, so that's why you'll see the record kind of dip a little bit more than you would expect. But also, DJ Lagway had 5 picks in the game, guys. Even though he went 33 of 49, 287. He had 5 picks, so just not good for the Florida quarterback. Penn State 152-6, Ohio State 137-9 over Ohio, Oregon 134-14 over Northwestern. Miami absolutely put BTA on South Florida 49-12. They knew what they were getting into with South Florida. South Florida had a great first couple of games. Absolutely fantastic, going ahead and upsetting those teams that they did in the first 2 weeks and really having a lot of momentum behind them. But then Miami, they have to prove themselves week in and week out to go ahead and make this college football playoff. And this year with Carson Beck throwing for 340 and 3 touchdowns, he needed to go ahead and prove himself this year as well. So they're on a mission, and they knew, like I said, what was coming into Miami. So they go ahead and get that W. And the big, I think, game, the two other big games of the night and the day rather was Georgia and Tennessee, an absolute barn burner. 44-41. Georgia prevails in Rocky Top. Joey Aguilar 24 of 36, 371, 4 touchdowns. I think Tennessee has found the replacement of Nico Elamaliava, even though it is 1 year and Joey will be probably going to the NFL draft after this year. But ultimately, big time from Aguilar, as well as Georgia, though, getting the W in Rocky Top. I mean, can't say enough about that. Big time win, and it looked like Tennessee was going to take it, but they get it, 44-41. And then the other big game of the night, Texas A&M takes down Notre Dame 16-8 as they beat them 41-40 in South Bend. Malik Reed 17-37, 360 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, and Jeremiah Love 23 carries, 94 yards and 1 touchdown. But Texas A&M goes ahead and prevails and wins in South Bend. I think that's a big-time win. And now Notre Dame is 0-2. 0-2 to start the season. So really tough there. And the big upset of the day, 2 big upsets of the day, I think, were Vanderbilt going ahead and really putting a whooping on South Carolina in South Carolina, 31-7. Unranked beating a ranked, so now Vanderbilt's 3-0, going to probably be ranked next week. Pavia had 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then the other upset of the day was Georgia Tech taking down Clemson 24-21, even though it was at home. Georgia Tech goes ahead and improves to 3-0 and now probably will be ranked not only high in the ACC, but also in the top 25. So that is the entire slate, not the entire slate, but all the good games I would, expect that you guys would be interested in. So right off the top 25, gave you guys the entire slate, but those were the big matchups of the day. Looking forward to next week. So let's go ahead and go into some big matchups for next week, and then we'll go into some MLB talk to round out the show. Syracuse at Clemson, pretty big matchup. Then we got South Florida at South Carolina State. We got a 21 versus 20 matchup. Texas Tech versus Utah. Oregon State. Ooh, you know how that is. Purdue, Notre Dame as well. Auburn, Oklahoma will be good. Michigan and Nebraska will be an interesting one. Florida and Miami, another rivalry there. Illinois and Indiana. just to name a few for next week. So those are some great matchups that we got going forward. And now let's go ahead and get into some MLB talk because it has absolutely been sizzling with the division races, and I need to go ahead and get something off my chest because obviously the Padres go ahead and get that W last night. But there's so much more to talk about the whole landscape of baseball that I haven't been able to I haven't been able to touch on Padres banter because that's a strictly Padres only podcast. But let's go ahead and dive into the standings really quick before we get into anything else. Let's go ahead and start with the wild card standings because honestly that's the only thing that matters, to be honest. I said start with this, but I was going to go over the divisions, but the divisions are kind of settled as is. I'll just go over the division leaders and then I'll go over the wild card. So right now we got the division leaders being, in the NL, we got the Milwaukee Brewers, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Then we have in the AL, the New York Yankees. Sorry, I apologize. Not the New York Yankees. That was the wrong graphic. Toronto Blue Jays, Detroit Tigers, and right now a tie in the NL West between the Astros and the Mariners. Now getting into the wild card standings, as this is where it gets into the nitty gritty. Starting with the NL, we got the Chicago Cubs, the San Diego Padres, and the New York Mets. But the interesting thing about it is the Mets have lost 8 straight games going into today, 1-9 in their last 10 games, and right behind them on their hinds are the Giants and Reds, as the Giants have surged back an absolute crazy resurgence to go ahead and get right back into the mix of the wild card. And I can't say enough about, the resurgence of them. I felt like they were down and out 2 weeks ago, and they really have just been winning games and winning games and winning games. They're playing the Dodgers right now, a really tough series, obviously in division rival, but to be 75 and 73 over 500 is insane to me because it didn't look good there for a minute. It didn't look good. They were losing a lot of games, but now they find themselves a half game back of the New York Mets, who at one point were the best team in baseball, y'all. So it's just crazy, crazy storyline going on. But then right behind them is the Reds at a game and a half. Right behind them is the Diamondbacks at 2 games. And right behind them, I think to round out the wild card, outside looking in, would be the Cardinals at 4 games back. Now moving on to the AL wild card, as we have the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Astros and Mariners, since they are both tied for the division, and the next best record would be the third best wild card spot. So whoever wins the division is obviously going to get the division, and whoever doesn't is going to probably get the third wild card spot, depending on if they can keep up the winning. But like I said, it's between the Yankees, Red Sox, Astros, and Mariners for the 4 top wild card spots right now. And right behind them are the Texas Rangers at 2 games back, Cleveland Guardians at 3.5 games back, Royals at 7 games back. So I feel like that's kind of, out there. So really, it's just the Rangers and Guardians really fighting for that last wild card spot with the Mariners and the Astros. So we'll see who wins the AL West division. But let's get into some storylines of the MLB before we go ahead and round out this show and cap it off. The MLB division races, like I said, continued to heat up as the Giants had a crazy resurgence into the wild card, competing with the Reds and passing the Reds in the standings, and now only a half game back of the New York Mets, who have lost 8 straight games. Even though the Giants lost last night, the Mets lost last night, so they're still a half game back. The Mets entering today were holding on for dear life after having the best record in the MLB through 70 games. The Mariners tied the Astros for the division lead. They play one another in 5 games. Kyle Schwarber goes ahead and ties Ryan Howard, or joins Ryan Howard rather, with the Phillies' 50 home run club. Will he pass Ryan Howard's 58 home runs? Will he? I don't know. There's still some games left for him to do so. Tatis continues his Gold Glove campaign, going ahead and robbing another home run, making it 4 this season and 5 in the past year. Goodness gracious. Platinum Glove on the way. Number 2, Judge passes Yogi Berra and Joe DiMaggio on the all-time Yankees home run list. Soto joins the 30-30 club this season, but now has 40 home runs after last night. San Francisco, let's go ahead and go through their schedule really fast because I want you guys to understand what they're going to have to see if they can make the playoffs. They're only a half game back. They got the Dodgers today. They got the D-backs for 3, and then they got the Dodgers again for 4 next following weekend. They got the Cardinals next following Monday, and then to round out the season, they have the Rockies not next week. next weekend, but the weekend after next weekend after they face the Dodgers. So we'll see what happens with the Giants. Could they make the playoffs after literally being down and out? And will the Mets not make the playoffs after being the best team in baseball through 70 games? I don't know. What a storyline. What a storyline. What a storyline. But sleeper, the San Francisco Giants could be a sleeper. If they continue to be hot and go into the playoffs, that's 100% a sleeper. And obviously my Mariners, but the Mariners who have been my sleeper for quite some time now, if they can go ahead and win the division, find a way to get a home series, just gonna be scary. But that is all for the very first episode of official Jay's Point After. I know we had Padres banter, I know we had Chargers banter, but this is the wide range of sports without being too long. Obviously, this is a little bit longer episode. I'm gonna find a way to dim it down a tiny bit, but gotta cover everything, y'all. It's been a while since we last talked, and I'm finally excited to get this thing off my chest. Probably won't go through the full slate of football games like we did this past week, but we're still gonna go over some topics that we need to. But at the end of the day, first of many, and I'm glad that you guys tuned in. All my day ones, I appreciate you guys. We're finally here, gonna be coming in week after week, and like I said, we'll be back next week for another episode of JPA. We out.